whatever is on your mind.
Okay. Yeah, maybe getting to the job you want because I think sometimes like when you're entry level, um, you kind of have to take what you can get a little bit. So it might not be exactly what you want, which is kind of the case I'm in right now. And I think the worry with that, and I think a lot of people feel this as well, is that then it's like you're stuck in this role where you're building experience that's not necessarily what you want. So are you kind of messing yourself up in the long run?
What do you mean when you say messing yourself up in the long run?
Because then when you do go and try and apply for things that are more what you want, it's kind of like you have kind of adjacent experience. Like, I guess if you're entry level, okay, pretend you're like coming out of university and you're applying for jobs, you're not going to get exactly what you want your job to be. And I think I'm a little bit worried that the job I have now is setting me on a trajectory like that's kind of adjacent to what I want to be doing and it's going to pull me in a path that I don't really want to go down. You know what I mean? For next time when I'm applying for jobs, they're going to look at this experience and maybe say, oh, well, you know what I mean? This is more like
Right,
health and safety based rather than environmental based.
right. So I think that there's a few things to think about there. One is you need to break down your goal. So there's this quote. Uh, and after I read your question, I wrote it down, which basically says, "Do not disturb yourself imagining your whole life at once." Which basically means if you think about the entirety of your career and the entirety of the trajectory of your career, of course you're going to be anxious and concerned and worried. There's no way that you won't be,
Yeah.
because that's just not the correct strategy to use when thinking about a problem of that size.
Yeah.
So any problem that you have that's like that is large, you need to think about the steps, not the entire thing.
Yeah. That's good advice.
So from that point of view, then your concern just becomes, well, each step along the way. And the best thing you can do is build the best map or the best like guide you can that you think is going to work, but there's really no way to know for sure.
Yeah.
And you've been in school, so I mean, when you were, I'm sure you've had a similar feeling in school. I'm sure lots of people do when they're going for a degree and they think, oh, is this degree even going to help me get the job I
A
want?
100%. Because for me, I got halfway or, towards probably the last year of my degree. And up until then, I had thought I did my degree in like cell bio and I thought I wanted to work in a lab. And then when I was in undergrad, I started working in a lab and I was like, I hate this. I absolutely hate this. But then luckily it was an environmental toxicology lab and it kind of put me onto environmental work. And I was like, okay, this is maybe more my trajectory. But it's funny because I think a lot of people will end up not going down the path of their degrees. For me, I'm the type of person that I was like, well, I have to finish this. I'm not going to
Mhm,
switch now.
mhm. So the there's always going to be the tension there. So you just have to be comfortable being committed to something and doing it as like best you can. Um, but you can't be guaranteed, you can't have the certainty that it's going to be the exactly the right thing that takes you to the next step. That's actually the wrong way to say it, because it might not take you to the goal you have in mind at the moment, but even that is not certain. Like
Yeah.
the goal you have in mind in the moment might not be your goal in 5 years.
Yeah.
So to get, so to spend a lot of time being concerned about that is a bit of a waste of, it's a bit of a waste of worry.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the better thing to do is to make more of a list of the skills that you want to get, more so than the experience that you want to get, the skills that you want to get, and then start thinking about jobs that get you those. Lots of people
Yeah.
can, so lots of people can be worried about experience, but in a lot of ways, when it's time for your interview, skills is actually the thing that makes up like has a much bigger impact on where you're going to be successful. Well, as when you actually get the job, you being successful in the job is going to be based on the skills. Some of the skills are going to be very like black and white, like writing emails, or you got to be good at doing X and Y. That type of stuff is super boring. More important skills might be you got to be good at uh, presenting, or you got to be good at
Yeah.
communication, or you have to be good at having difficult conversations or
Yeah.
engaging in conflict at work. Those are those are the skills that are more valuable and really doesn't matter exactly where you work. If you could work at a dream job, but if you don't learn to have difficult conversations and deal with conflict, that you're probably going to be worse off than the person that didn't work exactly the right job but has that skill.
100%. And I think that is kind of circling back to like my anxiety in my job now. That's where I feel like I've been stretched the most. It's not the Excel, it's not actually like any of the technical skills. That's all easy. It's socially that I have been kind of pushed out of my comfort zone a little bit. I think it's a good thing, but it's like I think we talked about this before, like me having to present to people who I'm really intimidated by, me having to tell 6-year-old men who've been doing this for 40 years, like kind of enforce policies. Like that's really scary. Like who am I to be telling these like guys who know what they're doing what to do?
Yeah, you're totally correct that that's pushing out of your comfort zone and that's the hardest part, but the that's exactly what you should be doing then.
Yeah.
Because and I believe people get into their mind that once they find this perfect job, or this which doesn't even exist, that all of those things won't matter, because it's like being in a relationship and this idea that, well, if I just find the perfect person, all of my personal baggage won't matter because
Yeah.
I'll be with the perfect person for me. And that's just not really true. That's romantic, but it's not really how things work. And even if you do find the perfect person that accepts you for all those things, you're probably better off in life trying to be a better person versus waiting for the perfect person. And then because then either way you're going to find your person, but it's better if you spent that time getting better. That's better than if you hadn't.
Yeah. And it's like anything, kind of like you said, it's like no matter what, even if it is the perfect job, no matter what job you have, you're probably going to have like your own baggage that comes up, your own insecurities, no matter what. And I think that's a good thing. It's like you're constantly working through it.
The other thing to remember is, and I think Jeff Bezos was the one who said this, and Jeff Bezos is a guy that can work any job he wants.
Yeah.
He said that you're only going to really be happy at your job like 60% of the time. So I think that's important for like young people like starting their career to remember, because I believe that in people's heads, they think that if I find my ideal job, that means I'm going to be happy, uh, 90% of the time. But that's really not the case. A bad job means it just means that you're unhappy a majority of the time, and a good job means you're just happy a majority of the time. But it's not 100. It's 55% versus 45%. Like that's the differences.
Yeah.
So even whatever job you have, I think you can still assess whether it's a good job based on based on that criteria. And I think for a lot of younger employees that are starting their career, I think they need to keep that in mind, because they set themselves up to be unhappy because they work an entry level job, and they're like, well, this isn't 100% satisfying. It's like, well, that's never going to be the case.
Yeah.
Like the person that can pick any job they want is still going to have to spend time doing things they don't want to do.
Yeah, and I think we
And
talked about that last time that, when you are young, there is probably a few years. You said maybe 2 years of kind of paying your dues, which I think
I would say
everyone
this,
does have to go through.
yeah, and I would say you don't pay your dues at a place that is completely making you miserable, but if you work at a place and you're like 50-50 on whether you like it or not, but it's giving you experience, then it's probably worth staying. If
Yeah.
it's making you 100% miserable, then it's probably not worth staying. Or if it's not giving you an opportunity to like to learn anything.
Yeah.
The
One
other,
fear I do have about kind of my resume, because I'm going to be leaving this job. Probably I might leave at the end of July to give myself a month to chill because I'm going back to grad school in September. One thing I'm a little bit nervous about in my resume is that it looks like I have been hopping a little
right.
bit. Because I last year, like, like with my dad, like I had a couple of like short-term contracts. It says on my resume like it was a contract. How much do you think other employers, when I go to apply, do you think that they'll think I'm not loyal, or that, you know, oh, she's just
You're
gonna leave like after a little bit? Do you think that
where you
matters?
where you are right now, no, it doesn't matter. If if especially if you have if the resume or just in the interview you can demonstrate good reasons. So leaving a job because you're going back to school and you're moving, no one's gonna no one's gonna question that. And even your job at the lab where you said, well, after I'm not sure how long you worked there.
A year. I stuck it out for a year.
Right. So a year is pretty good. So to say after a year, if I think you can, especially at an entry level job, I think you can say after a year I didn't like it, so I left is completely reasonable. I think as you move up to less entry level jobs, from like myself in like a leadership job, I would have to, I would say I would have to try the job for a minimum of 2 years, or else that starts to look like you weren't really trying to do the job.
Yeah. I've heard that
So,
before, that the kind of the optimum, you should try, if you can, if it's not terrible, to stick it out for 2 years before, like, do things in 2 years increments.
but that's again, there's I think that changes the from entry level to more senior level because there's a change in how much training and how much investment the company is doing into you. So at a higher level, they're they're saying if they're hiring you versus someone else, they're saying no to really valuable candidates and they're picking you instead. So that's and then they're probably giving you a lot of training and a lot of resources to get good at your job. The other I would say is I think this is just in general, you're you should be making choices in your career now that carry risk because of your age and you're starting your career. And the bigger mistake would be to make
To
less
stay.
risky decisions,
Yeah.
whatever however that looks. So being worried you actually should be more concerned about you're saying the mistake would be taking a job that's wrong or staying. Basically, you're saying the mistake would be taking a job that's wrong and then having to leave and have that mistake. You actually should be you actually should be wanting to make more mistakes.
Yeah.
You actually should be trying to collect mistakes because it's much easier to collect mistakes now for you and learn from them and then make a better choice later than it would be to collect mistakes at like at 40 or 50 or realize things are mistakes at 40 or 50. The mistakes are how you figure it out. Like that's
Yeah.
so
It's easier said than done, but you are right. It's no one wants to make mistakes, but you are right that it's like right now is the time if I'm gonna.
yeah, and that's true for I would say that the ability to make mistakes or make choices that you're not totally sure about, but still be able to like still be able to perform and not get too anxious and be able to like do those things. That's actually a that is also a skill. And that like serves you well for like for later on as you like move through your career. I've worked with a lot of people and um their fear, like even within the context of the job, about, oh, well, if we make a decision, we can't start over. What do we do? There's another good analogy, which is you have to think about choices as being like two doors. And if I go through this door, can I walk backwards through it? So if I take this job, can I can I quit it or can I leave? And what's the repercussions of that? And if it's at this point is going to be super low. The choices that you have to walk through that are sort of irreversible, those are things you need to consider way more. And those choices are really, really rare. That's like, should I have a baby? That's even buying a house is not, even buying a house can be reversed.
Yeah.
And people spend a lot of time overthinking really decisions that are reversible. And all that happens if you reverse a decision is it's a bit more work. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's a lot more work, but it's a bit more work.
Yeah. I do have another thing I was wanting to touch on. I think last time we talked, you mentioned something and it resonated so hard about how a lot of Gen Zs feel that they struggle with authenticity in the
Yeah.
workplace. I feel like I am struggling with that as well, and it's making me very insecure. I'm probably like at least 10 years younger than everyone I work with. Um, I guess I'm insecure because of the way I speak as well. I sound, I think, sometimes dumber than I am. I try really hard at work to sound like I'm smart and articulate myself very well. I also try and like hide my age as well.
Hmm.
I feel like I'm trying to, you know, not
Hmm.
act like I'm in my mid 20s. How much do you think that matters in the workplace? Because I have heard things, and I'm sure you have too, about how, Gen Zs, they have this bad like rep in the workplace for being too loud, too crazy, like lazy, like all these things.
So first off, if I would, from what I've read about, if I was going to summarize the worries that people have about Gen Z in the workplace, it's not that they're too loud or too crazy. It's that they lack resilience. That would
Mm,
probably be like one of the top ones. And this is a lot of what we've been talking about through this whole conversation, even what you're bringing up now. The thing that's going to make your boss be like, what's up with March, isn't that you're too young or that you're still learning how to sound professional. They know how old you are and they know what you sound like. What would label you with if you're talking about the sort of the Gen Z brush would be like, I don't know if I want to work here anymore because I'm too anxious about the fact that I'm young. That because when you say something like that, what that's showing is like the trait that you're lacking is resilience. They're not saying this is a problem. This is a problem that's like inside your mind. And so if your resilience is being able to say, I'm willing to do the practice and not be and all the baggage, like, all the sort of emotional stuff I have to deal with that, I'm gonna make that like a me problem. I'm not gonna make that a work problem. I will say this too, and you probably noticed this. Everywhere you go, uh, you start at a place, and everyone puts on a professional front,
yes,
especially when they start. And then
yes.
over time, you'll you'll be it'll be shocking when you start to like see
Get
even
to know people.
your yeah, when you get to know people, then you see their like walls come down
Yeah.
and how like wild they can be. And you don't have to look very far. Like even if you just look at stories of like, I'm always shocked when I read stories about CEOs or guys that own businesses and the like wild dumb stuff they do, like sleeping with people in the company, or in some cases, people that are owners of things, like letting their children that are completely inexperienced have way more control. So the I don't think that like age and professionalism necessarily go together. The trait that makes someone a professional is that even when faced with an obstacle or something they don't know, they're able to summon a level of calmness to the actions they're going to take. That's real. That is what a professional is. And you can look at that in sports, and you can look at that in business, and you can look at that in entertainers, you can look at that in all of those things. So the goal you're gonna try and do, and again, it's just through practice and like by really being super present in when you're doing these things, is okay, I'm nervous and I'm just gonna try and like be 1% calmer today when I'm doing this than I was yesterday.
Yeah.
And and calmness is really the like that is in a lot of ways the the trait that separates like professionals from non-professionals. And if there's another mistake that Gen Zers make is they don't see that. And so,
Yeah.
and that maybe that goes against the the sort of the authenticity piece of it, because there is a little bit of like there is a little bit of saying like, well, you just got to try and act a certain way, but like the more you act it, the better. There's also a lot of, in that realm, there's a lot of like resources in terms of like books you can read, or uh or courses you can do, or even just like there's like many people on YouTube who make videos that explain like how to be more um how to get more comfortable like speaking and communicating and things like that. But a lot of it comes down to being very present and not carrying that burden of like, oh, I have to be super perfect all the time. Just kind of letting
Yeah.
that go and being like just being yourself, and just knowing that like the more you practice it, the better you're gonna be. That is just how it goes.
Yeah. I do feel like when I was first starting, like you said, I was trying so hard to, maybe like act really professional. I feel like I was very guarded. Now the people I work with are so lovely and crazy and just love them. So the walls have come down. Do you feel that do you feel that joking around, or how I am, I'm very like
Right.
bubbly, loud. Do you think that that personality trait will make people take me less seriously?
No, I'll say this too. Charisma goes a long, long way. And I don't know why you would think that that people in business don't want to like crack jokes or like have fun. There's so many, I've worked with so many people, and they can, as they move up, they can behave so boring and they do themselves such a disservice by acting that way. And you can talk to lots of business owners and lots of CEOs, and this, I'm being general here, and obviously there are some that aren't like that, but they have personalities and they value personalities. Like what, like, even something, a dumb example might be like even those shows like Shark Tank, that the CEOs on those shows are like real CEOs that run real businesses and like have real meetings with people, but they all have personality and joke around and don't want people to hide that. So no, I don't think it's I think subject matter can, if you're making people uncomfortable, and that's a social skill, like if you don't realize you're doing that, I think if you're doing stuff that makes other people uncomfortable, that's going to work against you. I mean, professionally and unprofessionally. Like that's just, but outside of that, then no, I think it's a huge mistake to try to be serious. Who wants serious? Unless you're dealing with like a client in some specific sense where the subject matter has to be serious, I don't think it's necessary.
That's good to hear because I have a hard time being serious.
This is just another quick point, but do you think that people that run companies, when they watch a presentation or they listen to a talk, they don't want it dry. Nobody wants it dry. They would, if you can insert jokes into things that like actually into information laden presentation that actually works, that's a that's like a superpower. So I would say that no, it'd be silly to try and not do that.
Yeah. Okay, that's good.
So hopefully that helped.
That did help a lot.